the Tarot and the Holy Kabbalah. The next issue is the Holy Kabbalah. This is a very simple subject, and presents no difficulties to the ordinary intelligent mind. There are 10 numbers in the decimal system, and there is a genuine reason why there should be 10 numbers, and only 10, in a numerical system which is not merely mathematical, but philosophical. It is necessary, at this point, to introduce the Naples Arrangement. But first of all, one must understand the pictorial representation of the universe given by the Holy Kabbalah. See diagram. This picture represents the tree of life, which is a map of the universe. One must begin, as a mathematician would, with the idea of zero, absolute zero, which turns out on examination to mean any quantity that one may choose, but not, as the layman may at first suppose, nothing, in the absence of anything vulgar sense of the word. See Bereshith, Paris, 1902. The Naples Arrangement. The Kabbalists expanded this idea of nothing, and got a second kind of nothing which they called Ein Sof, without limit. This idea seems not unlike that of space. They then decided that in order to interpret this mere absence of any means of definition, it was necessary to postulate the Ein Sof or limitless light. By this they seem to have meant very much what the late Victorian men of science meant, or thought that they meant, by the luminiferous ether. The space-time continuum? All this is evidently without form and void. These are abstract conditions, not positive ideas. The next step must be the idea of position. One must formulate this thesis: if there is anything except nothing, it must exist within this boundless light, within this space, within this inconceivable nothingness, which cannot exist as nothingness, but has to be conceived of as a nothingness composed of the annihilation of two imaginary opposites. Thus appears the point, which has neither parts nor magnitude, but only position. But position does not mean anything at all unless there is something else, some other position with which it can be compared. One has to describe it. The only way to do this is to have another point, and that means that one must invent the number 2, making possible the line. But this line does not really mean very much, because there is yet no measure of length. The limit of knowledge at this stage is that there are 2 things, in order to be able to talk about them at all. But one cannot say that they are near each other, or that they are far apart. One can only say that they are distant. In order to discriminate between them at all, there must be a third thing. We must have another point. One must invent the surface, one must invent the triangle. In doing this, incidentally, appears the whole of plane geometry. One can now say, A is nearer to B than A is to C. But, so far, there is no substance in any of these ideas. In fact, there are no ideas at all, except the idea of distance and perhaps the idea of betweenness, and of angular measurement, so that plane geometry, which now exists in theory, is after all completely inchoate and incoherent. There has been no approach at all to the conception of a really existing thing. No more has been done than to make definitions, all in a purely ideal and imaginary world. Now then comes the abyss. One cannot go any further into the ideal. The next step must be the actual, at least, an approach to the actual. There are 3 points, but there is no idea of where any one of them is. A 4th point is essential, and this formulates the idea of matter. The point, the line, the plane. The 4th point, unless it should happen to lie in the plane, gives the solid. If one wants to know the position of any point, one must define it by the use of 3 coordinate axes. It is so many feet from the north wall, and so many feet from the east wall, and so many feet from the floor. Thus there has been developed from nothingness a something which can be said to exist. One has arrived at the idea of matter. But this existence is exceedingly tenuous, for the only property of any given point is its position in relation to certain other points. No change is possible, nothing can happen. One is therefore compelled, in the analysis of known reality, to postulate a 5th positive idea, which is that of motion. This implies the idea of time, for only through motion, and in time, can any event happen. Without this change and sequence, nothing can be the object of sense. It is to be noticed that this number 5 is the number of the letter He in the Hebrew alphabet. This is the letter traditionally consecrated to the Great Mother. It is the womb in which the Great Father, who is represented by the letter Yod, which is pictorially the representation of an ultimate point, moves and begets active existence. There is now possible a concrete idea of the point, and, at last, it is a point which can be self-conscious, because it can have a past, present and future. It is able to define itself in terms of the previous ideas. Here is the number 6, the center of the system, self-conscious, capable of experience. At this stage it is convenient to turn away for a moment from the strictly Kabbalistic symbolism. The doctrine of the next 3 numbers, to some minds at least, is not very clearly expressed. One must look to the Vedanta system for a more lucid interpretation of the numbers 7, 8 and 9, although they correspond very closely with the Kabbalistic ideas. In the Hindu analysis of existence, the rishis, sages, postulate 3 qualities: Sat, the essence of being itself; Chit, thought, or intellection; and Ananda, usually translated bliss, the pleasure experienced by being in the course of events. This ecstasy is evidently the exciting cause of the mobility of existence. It explains the assumption of imperfection on the part of perfection. The absolute would be nothing, would remain in the condition of nothingness. Therefore, in order to be conscious of its possibilities and to enjoy them, it must explore these possibilities. One may here insert a parallel statement of this doctrine from the document called the Book of the Great Talk to enable the student to consider the position from the standpoint of 2 different minds. All elements must at one time have been separate. That would be the case with great heat. Now, when the atoms get to the sun, we get that immense, extreme heat, and all the elements are themselves again. Imagine that each atom of each element possesses the memory of all his adventures in combination. By the way, that atom, fortified with memory, would not be the same atom, yet it is, because it has gained nothing from anywhere except this memory. Therefore, by the lapse of time and by virtue of memory, a thing could become something more than itself. Thus, a real development is possible. One can then see a reason for any element deciding to go through this series of incarnations, because so, and only so, can he go, and he suffers the lapse of memory which he has during these incarnations, because he knows he will come through unchanged. Therefore you can have an infinite number of gods, individual and equal though diverse, each one supreme and utterly indestructible. This is also the only explanation of how a being could create a world in which war, evil, etc., exist. Evil is only an appearance, because, like good, it cannot affect the substance itself, but only multiply its combinations. This is something the same as mystic monotheism, but the objection to that theory is that God has to create things which are all parts of himself, so that their interplay is false. If we presuppose many elements, their interplay is natural. These ideas of being, thought and bliss constitute the minimum possible qualities which a point must possess if it is to have a real sensible experience of itself. These correspond to the numbers 9, 8 and 7. The first idea of reality, as known by the mind, is therefore to conceive of the point as built up of these previous 9 successive developments from 0. Here then at last is the number 10. In other words, to describe reality in the form of knowledge, one must postulate these 10 successive ideas. In the Kabbalah, they are called Sephiroth, which means numbers. As will be seen later, each number has a significance of its own. Each corresponds with all phenomena in such a way that their arrangement in the tree of life, as shown in the diagrams, pp. 266, 268, 270, is a map of the universe. These 10 numbers are represented in the tarot by the 40 small cards. The tarot and the Formula of Tetragrammaton. What, then, are the court cards? This question involves another aspect of the system of development. What was the first mental process? Obliged to describe nothing, the only way to do so without destroying its integrity was to represent it as the union of a plus something with an equivalent minus something. One may call these 2 ideas, the active and passive, the father and mother. But although the father and mother can make a perfect union, thereby returning to zero, which is a retrogression, they can also go forward into matter, so that their union produces a son and a daughter. The idea works out in practice as a method of describing how the union of any two things produces a third thing which is neither of them. The simplest illustration is in chemistry. If we take hydrogen gas and chlorine gas, and pass an electric spark through them, an explosion takes place, and hydrochloric acid is produced. Here we have a positive substance, which may be called the son of the marriage of these elements, and is an advance into matter. But also, in the ecstasy of the union, light and heat are disengaged. These phenomena are not material in the same sense as the hydrochloric acid is material. This product of the union is therefore of a spiritual nature, and corresponds to the daughter. In the language of the alchemists, these phenomena were classified for convenience under the figure of 4 elements. Fire, the purest and most active, corresponds to the father. Water, still pure but passive, is the mother. Their union results in an element partaking of both natures, yet distinct from either, and this they called air. One must constantly remember that the terms used by ancient and medieval philosophers do not mean at all what they mean nowadays. Water does not mean to them the chemical compound H20, it is an intensely abstract idea, and exists everywhere. The ductility of iron is a watery quality. Its magnetic virtue, similarly, is fiery, its conductivity airy, and its weight and hardness earthy. Yet, weight is but a function of the curvature of the space-time continuum. Earth is the throne of spirit. The word element does not mean a chemical element, it means a set of ideas. It summarizes certain qualities or properties. It seems hardly possible to define these terms in such a way as to make their meaning clear to the student. He must discover for himself by constant practice what they mean to him. It does not even follow that he will arrive at the same ideas. This will not mean that one mind is right and the other wrong, because each one of us has his own universe all to himself, and it is not the same as anybody else's universe. The moon that A sees is not the moon that B, standing by him, sees. In this case, the difference is so infinitesimal that it does not exist in practice, yet there is a difference. But if A and B look at a picture in a gallery, it is very much not the same picture to both, because A's mind has been trained to observe it by his experience of thousands of other pictures. B has probably seen an entirely different set of pictures. Their experience will coincide only in the matter of a few well-known pictures. Besides this, their minds are essentially different in many other ways. So, if A dislikes Van Gogh, B pities him. If C admires Bouguer, D shrugs his shoulders. There is no right or wrong about any matter whatsoever. This is true, even in matters of the strictest science. The scientific description of an object is universally true, and yet it is not completely true for any single observer. The phenomenon called the daughter is ambiguous. It has been explained above as the spiritual ingredient in the result of the marriage of the father and the mother, but this is only one interpretation. The tarot and the elements. The ancients conceived of fire, water and air as pure elements. They were connected with the 3 qualities of being, knowledge and bliss, previously mentioned. They also correspond with what the Hindus called the 3 gunas, sattvas, rajas and tamas, which may be translated roughly as calm, activity, and slothful darkness. The alchemists had 3 similar principles of energy, of which all existing phenomena are composed: sulfur, mercury and salt. This sulfur is activity, energy, desire; mercury is fluidity, intelligence, the power of transmission; salt is the vehicle of these 2 forms of energy, but itself possesses qualities which react on them. The student must keep in his mind all these tripartite classifications. In some cases, one set will be more useful than others. For the moment, concentrate on the fire, water, air series. These elements are represented in the Hebrew alphabet by the letters Shin, Mem and Aleph. The Kabbalists call them the 3 mother letters. In this particular group, The three elements concerned are completely spiritual forms of pure energy. They can only manifest in sensible experience by impinging upon the senses, crystallizing out in a fourth element which they call earth, represented by the last letter of the alphabet, Tau. This, then, is another quite different interpretation of the idea of the daughter, which is here considered as a pendant to the triangle. It is the number 10 suspended from the 7, 8, 9 in the diagram. These two interpretations must be kept in mind simultaneously. The Kabbalists, devising the tarot, then proceeded to make pictures of these extremely abstract ideas of father, mother, son and daughter, and they called them king, queen, prince and princess. It is confusing, but they were also called knight, queen, king and princess. Sometimes, too, the prince and princess are called emperor and empress. The reason for this confusion is connected with the doctrine of the Fool of the Tarot, the legendary wanderer, who wins the king's daughter, a legend which is connected with the old and exceedingly wise plan of choosing the successor to a king by his ability to win the princess from all competitors. Fraser's Golden Bough is the authority on this subject. It has been thought better, for the present pack, to adopt the term knight, queen, prince and princess, to represent the series father, mother, son, daughter, because the doctrine involved, which is extraordinarily complex and difficult, demands it. The father is knight because he is represented as riding on a horse. It may make it more clear to describe the two main systems, the Hebrew and the pagan, as if they were, and had always been, concrete and separate. The Hebrew system is straightforward and irreversible. It postulates father and the mother from whose union issue son and daughter. There an end. It is only later philosophical speculation to derive the father-mother dyad from a unity manifest, and later still to seek the source of that unity in nothing. This is a concrete and limited scheme, crude, with its causeless beginning and its sterile end. The pagan system is circular, self-generated, self-nourished, self-renewed. It is a wheel on whose rim are father, mother, son, daughter. They move about the motionless axis of zero, they unite at will, they transform one into another, there is neither beginning nor end to the orbit, none is higher or lower than another. The equation, naught equals many equals 2 equals 1 equals all equals naught, ... is implicit in every mode of the being of the system. Difficult as this is, at least one very desirable result has been attained, to explain why the tarot has 4 court cards, not 3. It also explains why there are 4 suits. The 4 suits are named as follows: wands, attributed to fire, cups, to water, swords, to air, and discs, coins, or pentacles, to earth. The student will notice this interplay and counterchange of the number 4. It is also important for him to notice that even in the tenfold arrangement, the number 4 takes its part. The tree of life can be divided into 4 planes. The number I corresponds to fire, numbers 2 and 3, to water, numbers 4 to 9, to air, and the number 10 to earth. This division corresponds to the analysis of man. The number I is his spiritual essence, without quality or quantity. The numbers 2 and 3 represent his creative and transmissive powers, his virility and his intelligence. The numbers 4 to 9 describe his mental and moral qualities as concentrated in his human personality. The number 6, so to speak, is a concrete elaboration of the number I, and the number 10 corresponds to Earth, which is the physical vehicle of the previous 9 numbers. The names of these parts of the soul are, I, Jekida, 2 and 3, Kia and Neshkama, 4 to 9, Ruach, 10, Nefesh. These 4 planes correspond once more to the so-called 4 worlds, to understand the nature of which one should refer, with all due reservations, to the Platonic system. The number I is Atziluth, the archetypal world, but the number 2, as being the dynamic aspect of the number I, is the practical attribution. The number 3 is Bra, the creative world in which the will of the father takes shape through the conception of the mother, just as the spermatozoon, by fertilizing the ovum, makes possible the production of an image of its parents. The numbers 4 to 9 include Yetzirah, the formative world, in which an intellectual image, an appreciable form of the idea, is produced. This mental image becomes real and sensible in the number 10, Asaya, the material world. It is by going through all these confusing, and sometimes seemingly contradictory, attributions, with unwearying patience and persistent energy, that one comes at the end to a lucid understanding, to an understanding which is infinitely clearer than any intellectual interpretation could possibly be. This is a fundamental exercise in the way to initiation. If one were a shallow rationalist, it would be quite easy to pick holes in all these attributions and semi-philosophical hypotheses, or near-hypotheses, but it is also quite simple to prove by mathematics that it is impossible to hit a golf ball. Hitherto, the main theme of this essay has been the tree of life, in its essence the Sephiroth. It is now proper to consider the relations of the Sephiroth with each other. See diagram, right. It will be noticed that 22 lines are employed to complete the structure of the tree of life. It will be explained in due course how it is that these correspond to the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. It will be remarked that in some respects the way in which these are joined up appears arbitrary. Notably, there is an equilateral triangle, which one would think would be a natural basis for the operations of philosophy, consisting of the numbers 1, 4 and 5. But there are no lines joining 1 and 4, or 1 and 5. This is not an accident. Nowhere in the figure is there an erect equilateral triangle, although there are 3 equilateral triangles with the apex downwards. This is because of the original formula father, mother, son, which is 3 times repeated in a descending scale of simplicity and spirituality. The number 1 is above these triangles, because it is an integration of 0 and depends from the triple veil of the negative. Now the Sephiroth, which are emanations of the number 1, as already shown, are things in themselves, in almost the Kantian sense. The lines joining them are forces of nature, of a much less complete type. They are less abstruse, less abstract. The 22 keys, Atu, or trumps of the tarot here now is an excellent example of the all-pervading doctrine of equilibrium. The equation always reads x2 plus bx plus x equals 0. If it does not equal 0, it is not an equation. And so, whenever any symbol loses importance in one place in the Kabbalah, it gains in another. The court cards and small cards form the skeletal structure of the tarot in its principal function as a map of the universe. But, for the special significance of the pack as a key to magical formula, the 22 trumps acquire a peculiar importance. To what symbols are they attributed? They cannot be related identically with any of the essential ideas, because that place is taken by the cards from 1 to 10. They cannot represent primarily the father, mother, son, daughter complex in its fullness, because the court cards have already taken that position. They are attributed as follows: the 3 mother letters, Shin, Mem and Aleph, represent the 3 active elements, the 7 so-called double letters, Beth, Gimel, Daleth, Kaf, Pe, Resh and Tau, represent the 7 sacred planets, the remaining 12 letters He, Van, Zain, Cheth, Death, Yod, Lamed, Nun, Samak, Ain, Sodi and Kof represent the signs of the zodiac. There is a slight clotting or overlapping in this arrangement. The letter Shin has to do duty for both fire and spirit, in very much the same way as the number 2 partakes of the nature of the number I, and the letter Tau represents both Saturn and the element of earth. In these difficulties there is a doctrine. But one cannot dismiss these 22 letters thus casually. The stone that the builders rejected becomes the head of the corner. These 22 cards acquire a personality of their own, a very curious personality. It would be quite wrong to say that they represent a complete universe. They seem to represent certain rather curious phases of the universe. They do not seem essential factors in the structure of the universe. They change from time to time in their relation to current events. A glance at the list of their titles seems to show no longer the strictly philosophical and scientific spirit of austere classification that is found in the other cards. There leaps at us the language of the artist. These names are, the Fool, the Juggler, the High Priestess, the Empress, the Emperor, the Hierophant, the Lovers, the Chariot, Lust, the Wheel of Fortune, adjustment, the hanged man, death, art, the devil, the house of God, the star, the moon, the sun, the eon, the universe. Obviously these are not plain, straightforward symbolic representations of the signs, elements and planets concerned. They are rather hieroglyphs of peculiar mysteries connected with each. One may begin to suspect that the tarot is not a mere straightforward representation of the universe in the impersonal way of the system of the Yi King. The tarot is beginning to look like propaganda. It is as if the secret chiefs of the Great Order, which is the guardian of the destinies of the human race, had wished to put forward certain particular aspects of the universe, to establish certain especial doctrines, to declare certain modes of working, proper to the existing political situations. They differ, somewhat as a literary composition differs from a dictionary. It has been very unfortunate, but quite unavoidable, to be obliged to go so far into argument, and that this argument has involved so many digressions as a preliminary to a straightforward description of the pack. It may make it simpler to proceed to summarize the above statements. Here is a simple statement of the plan of the Tree of Life. The numbers, or things in themselves, are 10, successive emanations from the triple veil of the negative. The small cards numbered 1 to 10 correspond to the Sephiroth. These cards are shown in fourfold form, because they are not the pure abstract numbers, but particular symbols of those numbers in the universe of manifestation, which is, for convenience, classified under the figure of 4 elements. The court cards represent the elements themselves, each element divided into 4 sub-elements. For convenience, here follows a list of these cards: Knight of Wands, Fire of Fire Queen of Wands, Water of Fire Prince of Wands, Air of Fire Princess of Wands, Earth of Fire, Knight of Cups, Water of Fire Queen of Cups, Water of Water Prince of Cups, Air of Water Princess of Cups, Earth of Water, Knight of Swords, Fire of Air Queen of Swords, Water of Air Prince of Swords, Air of Air Princess of Swords, Earth of Air, Knight of Discs, Fire of Earth Queen of Discs, Water of Earth Prince of Discs, Air of Earth Princess of Discs, Earth of Earth. The tarot trumps are 22 in number. They represent the elements between the Sephiroth or things in themselves, so that their position on the Tree of Life is significant. Here are 1 or 2 examples. The card called the Lovers, whose secret title is the Children of the Voice, the Oracle of the Mighty Gods, leads from the number 3 to the number 6. The number 6 is the human personality of a man, the number 3 is his spiritual intuition. Therefore, it is natural and significant that the influence of the 3 upon the 6 is that of the intuitional or inspirational voice. It is the illumination of the mind and the heart by the Great Mother. Consider again the card joining the number I to the number 6. This card is called the High Priestess, and is attributed to the moon. The card represents the heavenly Isis. It is a symbol of complete spiritual purity. It is initiation in its most secret and intimate form, descending upon the human consciousness from the ultimate divine consciousness. Looked at from below, it is the pure and unwavering aspiration of the man to the Godhead, his source. It will be proper to enter more fully into these matters when dealing separately with the cards in turn. From the foregoing it will be clear that the tarot illustrates, first of all, the Tree of Life in its universal aspect, and secondly, the particular comment illustrating that phase of the Tree of Life which is of peculiar interest to those persons charged with the guardianship of the human race at the particular moment of the production of any given authorized pack. It is therefore proper for those guardians to modify the aspect of the pack when it seems to them good to do so. The traditional pack has itself been subjected to numerous modifications, adopted for convenience. For instance, the Emperor and the Empress, in the medieval packs, were referred quite definitely to the Holy Roman Emperor and his consort. The card originally called the Hierophant, representing Osiris, as is shown by the shape of the tiara, became, in the Renaissance period, the Pope. The High Priestess came to be called Pope Joan, representing a certain symbolic legend which circulated among initiates, and became vulgarized in the fable of a female pope. More important still, the Angel, or the Last Judgment, represented the destruction of the world by fire. Its hieroglyph is, in a way, prophetic, for when the world was destroyed by fire on 21st of March, 1904, see the Equinox of the Gods, look. Sit. One's attention was inevitably called to the similarity of this card to the stele of revealing. This being the beginning of the new eon, it has seemed more fitting to show the beginning of the eon, for all that is known about the next eon, due in 2000 years' time, is that its symbol is the double-wanded one. See Al 3:34. The reference is to Maat, Themis, Lady of the Balance. But the new eon has produced such fantastic changes in the settled order of things that it would be evidently absurd to attempt to carry on the outworn traditions. The rituals of the old time are black. It has consequently been the endeavor of the present scribe to preserve those essential features of the tarot which are independent of the periodic changes of eon, while bringing up to date those dogmatic and artistic features of the tarot which have become unintelligible. The art of progress is to keep intact the eternal, yet to adopt an advance-guard, perhaps in some cases almost revolutionary, position in respect of such accidents as are subject to the empire of time.